Humankind has always been fascinated with tales of monsters and dragons. This goes for one of the most imaginative minds of the 20th century, J.R.R. Tolkien, and his mind-blowing genius of subcreation. He used this to portray the dualities of sin and free will. Some of the most terrifying creatures, spun from his imagination, play a pivotal role in his story. Monsters are the embodiment of the unknown. They're beings that are out of our control, but their defeat in Tolkien's works perfectly presents the theme of good versus evil. In this marvelous video, we're going to count down the top 8 scariest creatures in Tolkien's lore. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Ungoliant, the distant mother of the infamous Shelob. Ungoliant is considered to be one of the most terrifying beasts spun from Tolkien's mind. She was known to be an ally of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord. She mostly worked her dark necromancy in Aman. Like the character of Tom Bombadil, Ungoliant's origins needed to be clearly explained. Many believe that she was a Maiar, a primordial spirit born to help the Valar shape the world. After Morgoth's defeat, Ungoliant fled the threat of the Valar and went into a ravine south of Mount Harmontir. Here it is believed she took the form of the monstrous spider and fed on light itself. When Morgoth eventually returns, he wishes to exact his revenge against the elves and the Valar. Thus came the darkening of Valinor. Part of his plan was to make Ungoliant drain the sap of the 2 trees of Valinor. Not only did she drain the sap from the trees, but she also poisoned them. After this, she drank deeply from the wells of Varda, which contained even more collected sap from the cosmic tree. This made her grow into such a behemoth that even Dark Lord Morgoth felt afraid. The monster demanded that Morgoth hand over the Silmarils to her. The Silmarils, or Jewels of Feanor, were crafted from the essence of 2 trees. Morgoth refused, which led to his being woven into Ungoliant's dark web. He was rescued by his loyal servants, the Balrogs, who had awoken from the ruins of Angband. She was driven off into the darkness, where she bred with the great spiders, giving us monsters like Shelob. Glaurung, the Gold Worm, the father of dragons and the first great serpent to roam Middle-earth. When Morgoth was defeated yet again by the Noldor elves in Beleriand, he realized the need for much stronger forces than a rabble of mindless orcs. You see, the Noldor elves were considered to be the strongest of their race in the First Age, ruled by the High King, Finwë. It took over a century of rearing and growing a dragon in the deep pits of Angband. Glaurung's first form was wingless, hence his name. The dragon was young and overestimated his own strength, as he lay merciless waste across the plains of Enfauglith and the settlements of Hithlum and Dorthonion. But the valiant prince of Hithlum, Fingon, realized that the great worm hadn't reached his full strength, allowing his archers to drive him back to the dark pits. After 2 whole centuries, Glaurung was unleashed during the Battle of the Sudden Flame, aka Dagor Bragollach. The dragon's might, combined with Morgoth's flames, unleashed from the Iron Mountain, hit the High Elves of Beleriand with full force. He was also the holder of Morgoth's seized territories. Glaurung used his hypnotic dragon spell, cast by his gaze, to hold sway over his foe. Then came the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, the 5th battle in the War of the Great Jewel. By this point, Glaurung had bred his offspring into dragons as monstrous as him. No man or elf stood a chance against their wrath, except for the dwarves of Belagos, who were sent to fight the drake. And Calagon the Black, another great serpent of the First Age. And Calagon the Black was another dragon bred by Morgoth. He was an Uruloki, a fire-breathing drake with flames deadlier than any regular dragon, a colossal sight to behold, and Calagon was the largest drake to terrorize Middle-earth. When the half-elf mariner, Eärendil, urged the Valar to overthrow Morgoth's tyranny, they called upon the host of Valinor, also known as the Host of the West. They crossed the Sea of Aman to fight against Morgoth's forces in the War of the Wrath. Nearing defeat, Morgoth set free his fleet of dragons headed by Ancalagon, who announced their terrifying arrival with lightning, thunder, and columns of flame. They chased the armies of the Valar from the gates of Angband, until Eärendil summoned the Eagles of Manwë, led by their lord Thorondor. The great eagles and the terrible dragons fought for the entire day, until Ancalagon fell into Thangorodrim. The Thangorodrim, a cluster of active volcanoes amidst the Iron Mountain, were destroyed as the great dragon fell upon their smoking peaks. Calagon the Black was mentioned by Gandalf as he told Frodo about the origins of the One Ring. He claimed that only ancient dragonfire could consume and melt the rings of power, and Calagon the Black could easily smelt Sauron's One Ring to rule them all, but his kind ceased to exist centuries ago. The Nameless Thing. The Nameless Things were said to be way older than Sauron. They dwelled deep beneath the surface of the world, and Gandalf believed they were far, far below the deepest delvings of the dwarves, saying, "The world is gnawed by nameless thing. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he." Their existence can be traced as far back as the Elder Days, even before the awakening of the Eld. In appearance, the Nameless Things were said to be monstrous, slimy fish, who preferred rotting in the darkness of their caves. As the orcs of the Misty Mountains began digging to build Goblin Town, the interconnected tunnels nearly touched these ancient beasts. But wary of the noise, the nameless beasts retreated even deeper into undisturbed depth. In the book, Lay of the Children of Húrin, Tolkien described holy shrines built in secret places for the worship of these primordial beings, older than time itself. In the recent Rings of Power TV show, we saw Galadriel, Halbrand, and 5 other Southlanders adrift on the Sundering Sea on a feeble raft. They were ambushed by a great worm, which had destroyed the Southlander ship previously. It was suggested that the nameless things roam the limbo of the Sundering Seas, which divides the undying lands from Middle-earth. What strikes primal terror of the nameless thing is the fact that they were of no name. Such ancient beings with cloudy origins, not one living soul knows what power the nameless things hold. The Watcher in the water outside the entrance of Moria, as portrayed in the Fellowship of the Ring, could potentially be one of the nameless things. Smaug, the golden red fire drake of the north, was said to be one of the last great dragons of Middle-earth. Smaug, the greatest of calamities, had a hide like tenfold shield, teeth like swords, claws like spears, and the shock of his tail was nothing less than a thunderbolt, wings that blew hurricanes, and his breath was death itself. In the Third Age, Smaug cast his eye on the prosperous dwarven kingdom of Erebor. The wealth of the dwarves lay in the kingdom under the mountain, as gold, silver, pearls, jewels of magic, and the Arkenstone of Thrain lay at the heart of it all. His greed for gold led him to attack the dwarven kingdom and lay waste across the Dale, the city of men. None could withstand his fiery onslaught as he killed the people of Dale and Erebor like a wolf among sheep. Smaug ruled the Lonely Mountain for nearly 2 centuries, completely destroying the surrounding countryside and guarding the treasure he snatched from the dwarf. But Thrain's grandson, Thorin Oakenshield, led a quest with 12 other dwarves, Gandalf, and their appointed burglar Bilbo Baggins, to reclaim their home. Bilbo stealthily entered the mountain to find Smaug sprawled across his hoard with gems and jewels embedded in his hide. Bilbo is asked whether he should live or die, as the dragon engages him in riddles. Smaug then flew to Lake Town to destroy it, but was confronted by Bard the Bowman, who used an old black arrow to kill the fire drake. Bilbo had observed a chink in the dragon's armor, which allowed Bard to precisely find his mark. Balrog. The Balrog confronted by Gandalf wasn't the only one to exist. He was the remaining one of many. For those unfamiliar with the sheer depths of lore woven by Tolkien, you'd be surprised to know just how many of these monstrosities were created by Morgoth, such as the 7 Maiar who were corrupted by Morgoth and turned into Umayar, demons of power. They first lived in Utumno, a fortress in the Iron Mountain, but when Morgoth was defeated after the Battle of the Powers, they migrated to Angband. The Balrogs existed during the Years of the Trees. When Ungoliant attacked their master Morgoth, the Balrogs awoke from their hibernation and drove the monstrous arachnid away with their fiery whips. The First Age saw a few of the mightiest battles to happen. One of these was the Battle Under the Stars. Feanor, the second elven king of Noldor, drew out the Balrogs from Angband, but was soon overwhelmed. The lord of the Balrogs, Gothmog, struck down the elven king till he was carried away, burnt and barely alive. Most of the Balrogs perished in the War of Wrath, except for one. The Flame of Udun, Durin's bane, fled into the dwarven kingdom of Khazad-dûm. There he lurked until the dwarves stumbled upon him. The Balrog killed Durin. Years later, Thrain also hesitated to enter Moria, in fear of the glowing evil within. Finally, in the Third Age, the Fellowship of the Ring was forced to take its path through Moria. There, they encountered Durin's bane, whose snarls shook the very pillars of the abandoned kingdom. Gandalf stood against the Balrog as a servant of the secret fire. The two fell off the bridge of Khazad-dûm, after which the Balrog fled through the tunnels of the Nameless Thing, with the wizard in close pursuit. Nazgûl. The Nazgûl were men once, men whose hearts were easily seduced by promises of power. Celebrimbor forged 19 rings, but Sauron got his hands on 16 of them. He gave 9 rings of power to mortal men. 3 of them were Númenóreans, and 1 was an Easterling king. The mortal men bloomed in power, prestige, and wealth, but the rings slowly corrupted every bit of their soul. Eventually, they became bound to Sauron with the one ring to rule them all, and were left invisible to all those except who could peer into the realm of the Wraith. When Sauron diminished, so did the Ringwraiths. The most infamous of the 9 were their lord, the Witch King of Angmar, and Khamûl the Easterling. In the Third Age, Sauron was defeated by the Last Alliance, while the Witch King established his rotten realm of Angmar. The Witch King launched a war on Arnor, narrowing in on its realm of Rhudaur, Carlodan, and Arthedain. His assaults were slowed by the combined forces of elves from Lindon, Rivendell, and Lothlorien. Apart from the lore of the books, the Nazgûl were best known for playing a pivotal role in the War of the Ring. They were sent by their master Sauron to search the Shire. Khamûl the Easterling led his hunt of Frodo, chasing them down on their cursed coal horses, but the Hobbit barely got away with the help of his friends Sam, Merry, and Pippin. The Nazgûl cornered Frodo at Weathertop Hill, where Khamûl stabbed the Hobbit with a Morgul blade. The Nazgûl emitted high-pitched shriek, which instilled pure terror in mortal. They also possessed the Black Breath, their venomous aura that would kill any living being. Fell Beasts. The Black Wings, the nightmarish rides of the Nazgûl, were named the Fell Beasts. In appearance, the Fell Beasts were winged creatures with pitch-black hue, so dark that they appeared like moving shadows even in broad daylight. The monsters had long necks, free of scales or feathers. The lore also describes them with sharp beaks and long talons that could slice any mortal into ribbons within seconds. Akin to their black riders, the Fell Beasts also emitted piercing screams and stunk of death and decay. Their origins are hazy, but they were said to be older than in the Elder Days. However, most of their kind were hunted and killed in the First Age. The last remaining brood of fell beasts was found by Sauron, who fed them cursed meats, instilling an appetite for evil and malice in the winged monster. When the Nazgûl's horses were swept away by the flood, called upon by Lord Elrond, in the river Bruinen, the Ringwraiths were given these black wings as new steeds. When Frodo, Sam, and Gollum passed through the dead marshes, they ducked out of sight from one of the Nazgûl atop a fell beast, most famously during the Battle of Pelennor Field. Before a fell beast could devour an injured King Theoden, Éowyn came to his defense, but as the saying goes, never come between the Nazgûl and his prey. It was said that no living man could kill the Witch King of Angmar. She was no man. Not only did Éowyn behead the fell beast, but she also killed the Witch King. All hail Rohan's shield maiden. Orcs. They were once elves who were corrupted and turned into savage killers. The orcs were created by Morgoth during the Years of the Tree. The awakening of the elves was an event that occurred hundreds of Valyrian years before the first rising of the sun. During this, Morgoth sneaked in evil spirits among the elves, who slowly brainwashed them against the Valar. Those elves who strayed beyond the safety of their lands were captured by a mysterious rider and brought to Morgoth's fortress at Utumno. Here, they were tortured and deformed into the first brood of the orcs. The Dark Lord Morgoth bred armies of orcs in Angband for the Battle of Beleriand. When the House of Feanor arrived on Middle-earth, Morgoth sent a band of orcs to kill them, but they were squashed by the sheer power of the Noldor. Feanor was eventually killed by the Balrog, which let the orcs skulk underground and breed into vast numbers, undisturbed. In the War of Wrath of the First Age, the orcs were nearly wiped out, but the remnant survivors fled into the mountains of Angmar, the Grey and Red Mountain. When Sauron made Mordor his realm in the Second Age, the fortress of Barad-dûr was built, and the orcs were his primary soldier. The Eastern orcs were wary of Sauron and his somewhat human form, but when he revealed his true guise, the remaining orcs were lured over to the dark side. Orcs were described as cruel, sadistic beings, fueled by pure hate. Their equipment and armor were nowhere near pleasing to the eye, but they had clever machines, intrigued by steel and wheel. Troll. The father of all monsters, Morgoth, created the trolls of Middle-earth during the twilight of the Elder Days. Their time of creation meant that even a single ray of sunshine would turn them into stone forever. Like the orcs, significant numbers of the trolls died during the War of the Wrath. They were unintelligible beasts who slaved for Sauron. In the Second and Third Age, he created the Olog-hai, an advanced breed of troll that was resistant to sunlight and equipped with warhammers and spiked maces. We get to see a comical trio of trolls in The Hobbit, when Thorin Oakenshield and his company with Bilbo encounter Tom, Bert, and William, the three hill trolls who incessantly argue about what their supper should be. They caught the dwarves and Bilbo, and then spent another hour or so debating on how to skin and cook their sweet meat. The company was saved by Gandalf, who exposed the trolls to sunlight, turning them into statues. Near the beginning of the War of the Ring, the Fellowship were faced with cave trolls in Moria. Boromir's sword failed to impale their hide, but the trolls scattered in fear once Durin's Bane stalked up the corridors. Sauron used the Olog-hai variety in the Siege of Gondor, Battle of Pelennor Fields, and Battle of the Black Gate. The trolls were the crucial brute strength of Sauron's armies. In the Fourth Age, Samwise Gamgee wrote Perry the Winkle, a poem which spoke about a lonely troll who wandered into the Shire looking for friends. Gollum. An early hobbit who was named Smeagol, Gollum is often considered to be a misunderstood anti-hero. Sometime in the Third Age, Smeagol went fishing with his cousin Deagle in the Gladden Field. There, Deagle discovered the One Ring at the bottom of the river. When Smeagol laid his eyes on the ring in his cousin's hand, he was instantly ensnared. First, he asked for the precious ring as a birthday present. Then he tried to take it by force, ultimately strangling Deagle to death for his precious. Smeagol was banished from his community, driven away and cursed as a murderer. He slinked into the caves of the Misty Mountain, being tormented by the One Ring. Smeagol wept to be alone, free of the whispers. He forgot the taste of bread, the sound of the rustling trees, and the softness of the wind. The ring ate away at his mind, body, and soul. Smeagol became sickly away from the sunlight, and often made a choke sound, Gollum, a symptom of his misery that eventually became his name. For the quest of Erebor, Bilbo Baggins stumbled across Gollum's lake, where he found the ring and put it in his pocket. Later, Gollum and Bilbo engaged in a game of riddles. He was captured and tortured for information on the ring by Sauron. Gollum played an essential role in Frodo and Sam's journey into Mordor. Frodo's kindness brought out the Smeagol side in him, but when he felt betrayed by the hobbits, Gollum took over and conspired to kill them. Gollum represented the duality of good and evil, and how both these traits can exist within the same being. Shelob. How did Gollum conspire to kill the two hobbits? Well, he led them right into Shelob's lair. The monstrous arachnid was said to be the last offspring of Ungoliant. In the Second Age, Shelob fled from the Beleriand and feasted on her own children. When Sauron made Mordor his realm, Shelob retreated into the darkness of the Mountains of Shadow. In Cirith Ungol, she made her lair, weaving a labyrinth of webs that trapped any creature foolish enough to pass through. The Dark Lord Sauron was aware of her presence, considering her to be the guard of Cirith Ungol's past. He felt uncharacteristically amused by the arachnid child, calling her his cat. He sent prisoners of war and servants for her to feed on. When Gollum was freed from Mordor after his torture, the pitiful creature stumbled into Shelob's lair. She nearly ate him, but he saved himself with the promise of bringing her sweeter meat. In an attempt to get his precious back, Gollum led Frodo and Sam into her lair, where they were trapped in her tightly spun web. But Frodo used his sword Sting to slice through them, and used the Phial of Galadriel to guide his way out of the tunnel. The bottled light from one of the stars of Earendil painfully blinded Shelob, who retreated into the darkness. No one in her aged life wounded her the way Sam did. In his desperate act of saving Frodo, he stabbed her in the stomach with Sting, which was enough for her to leave them alone. Warg. The wolfish rides of the orcs of Mordor and Isengard. Wargs were a deadly breed of wolves that served under the Dark Lord Sauron. In the Third Age, a pack of wargs made a deal with the residents of Goblin Town. They planned to raid the woodman villages and enslave any survivors. The wargs from way beyond the edge of the wild were led by a great grey chief wolf, who stumbled upon Thorin and company. The grey warg drove the dwarves, wizard, and hobbit up a stand of trees, with Dory pulling Bilbo away from snapping jaws in the nick of time. The wargs believed that Thorin and his companions were woodmen spies, and did not relent until Gandalf began chucking lit-up pine cones at them. Shortly after Smaug's death, the wargs, orcs, and great bats gathered at Gundabad and conspired to avenge the death of the great goblin who had died at the hands of Thorin and company. Of course, they were defeated by the good forces of Middle-earth during the Battle of the Five Armies. When the Fellowship of the Ring tried to cross the Redhorn Pass, they were ambushed by a pack of wargs. Legolas shot their leader, the Hound of Sauron, in the neck. Another instance of their appearance was during the War of the Ring, when Saruman led a league of warg riders to ambush the people of Rohan on their way to Helm's Deep. In the movie The Two Towers, the riders of Rohan, along with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, held these beasts off. Gimli got trapped underneath two warg carcasses while Aragorn fell off a nearby cliff, being thrown over by a warg of Isengard. Watcher in the Water. This tentacled beast is said to be one of the Nameless Thing. When the Cyrano River was dammed, it created a stagnant pool of murky water underneath the western walls of Moria. The lake reached Moria's gate in the west with only a narrow walkway as passage into the mine. A luminous and pale green beast lurked under the surface, who was said to have come from the great depths of Middle-earth. The Watcher in the Water, as a nameless thing, might have gnawed its way into the Morian lake. In a Tolkien bestiary, the beast was speculated to be like a great kraken with tentacles that pulled in unwitting prey. It was also believed that the Watcher in the Water awoke because of the same disturbances that shook Durin's Bane out of hibernation as well. When the dwarves tried to escape the mines of Moria, one of them, named Oin, was roped in by the beast. In the Third Age, the Fellowship stood by the lake as Gandalf tried to crack the password of the doors of Durin. Boromir idly threw a stone into the water, which disturbed the monster as it snaked a slimy tentacle and nearly pulled Frodo in. Sam slashed at the tentacle, which released Frodo, but 20 other appendages burst from the boiling boiling lake. The Fellowship retreated inside Moria, but the Watcher tried to follow them by hoisting itself up. Its tentacles swung Durin's door shut, effectively blocking one of the Fellowship's ways out. If it wasn't for Sam, Frodo could very well have become Monster Chow, but at least the ring would have been put away for a few more centuries. Uruk-hai and Berserkers. The Uruk-hai appeared way before Saruman's creation of them in the Third Age. A crossbreed of orcs and goblin men, the Uruk-hai destroyed Elithian and the city of Osgoliath. During the War of the Ring, Saruman the White bred armies of Uruk-hai that sported the white hand as a symbol of their allegiance. Some also say that Uruk-hai were a crossbreed of orcs and men. They stood taller than any mortal man, and possessed immeasurable strength. They were a genuinely superior breed of hybrid orcs that never tired or slunk away from sunlight. If you think the Uruk-hai sound intimidating, they're nothing compared to their Berserkers. Berserkers were said to be even larger than an average Uruk-hai. They didn't wear any armor in battle except for a bowl-like helmet. This helmet was filled with the blood of their enemy. Its intoxicating smell drove them into a rampage in battle. In this Berserker state, they felt no pain and would willingly let themselves die before achieving what they were bred for. Remember the crazed Uruk-hai during the Battle of Helm's Deep, who ran with a torch in his hands like his life depended on it? This was a Berserker whose only purpose in that moment was to ignite the blasting powder placed to destroy the deeping wall of the keep. Legolas shot not one but 2 arrows into the Berserker's chest, and he kept running and reached his end. Goblin. The goblins were also known as the orcs of the Misty Mountain. Tolkien often used the terms orcs and goblins interchangeably. After Morgoth was finally chained down in Valinor, his leaderless followers scattered throughout Middle-earth. Some retreated underground into the mines of Moria, while the others set up the goblin capital at Mount Gundabad. Amongst many of these notable cities was Goblin Town by the High Pass, which is located near the elven city of Rivendell. Living underground and feeding on malice led these orc-like beings to deform even further into what we identify as goblins. They served Sauron as part of his armies during the Second Age, but after his defeat in the War of the Last Alliance, the goblins returned to their strongholds in the Misty Mountains Cove. One such pack of goblins from Barad-dûr ambushed Isildur and his men when they were on their way to Rivendell. During the quest to Erebor in the Third Age, Thorin and his companions took refuge in a cave by the High Pass. There, they fell into Goblin Town, where they encountered their leader, the Great Goblin. He was indeed a terrifying sight to behold, with an enormous head and a booming voice that loved to sing horrible songs about bones shattering, beating, and battering, necks ringing and being hung from rack. When the Great Goblin realized that Thorin carried the elvish blade named the Orcrist, it enraged the leader of the goblin. He leapt to attack Thorin, and all the torches in their kingdom went out. The only thing that glowed was Glamdring. Gandalf had come to their rescue yet again. The defeat of the Great Goblin stayed with his minions for a long time. They gathered their forces to avenge him in the Battle of the Five Armies. Mumakil, the elephant-like creatures used by the Haradrim, were named Oliphants by the hobbits. In Bilbo's Red Book of Westmarch, the Oliphants were said to be as big as houses. In the territories of Harad in the Third Age, the Mumakil were said to be the ancient ancestors of elephant, hence their hobbit name. During the War of the Ring, the Haradrim and their mounts of Mumakil were summoned by Sauron to be used as beasts of war. The Oliphants rampaged through the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, decked out with red and gold war tower. Many also believe that these Oliphants were explicitly bred to possess an insatiable bloodlust on any battlefield. They would smash their enemies into jelly and use their trunks to strike them down. In appearance, the Mumakil looked just like elephants, just vastly larger. They also had an extra set of tusks and hides so thick that no man-made weapon could pierce it. The only chinks in their armor were their eyes. When the Oliphants were blinded, they went into uncontrollable rage. In this state of agony, they killed their masters who sat atop their backs. In Peter Jackson's Return of the King, we see Rohirrim bravely face the Mumakil. The riders never show a hint of hesitation toward following their king into a charge against these beasts of war. Perhaps one of the most famous scenes was when Legolas skillfully took down not only a whole war tower off the Oliphant's back, but managed to kill the mammoth as well, and of course, sticking the landing with his undeniable elvish grace. Karkaroth. In the First Age of Middle-earth, none other than Morgoth bred yet another horrendous creature. This was Draugluin, the first ever werewolf to roam the land. One of his offspring was Karkaroth, also known as Red Maw. Morgoth raised this werewolf on living flesh and trained him to stand against Huan, the great wolfhound, with special powers granted by the Valar. Morgoth also named Karkaroth and Fauglier, which meant Jaws of Thirst, a terrifying sight for anyone unlucky enough to face him. Karkaroth had gleaming red eyes and a deadly maw dripping with poison. He began began by guarding the gate of Angband, but later became involved in the quest for the Silmaril. The great werewolf bit off Berin's hand in which he held the Silmaril, the jewels of Feanor. The jewels raised away the inside of his body, but he was filled with unprecedented power nonetheless. He bound forth from Angband, killing dwarves, men, and elves alike, and wrought havoc throughout Beleriand. Beren and Huan the Hound began their hunt for Carcharoth. As a creature of the night, the werewolf hid in the shadows but was eventually cornered, and Fauglier bit down on Huan and Beren, letting his poison course through them. But Moblung of the Heavy Hand cut through the werewolf's belly. There he found Beren's hand still clutching the jewel of Feanor for dear life. Marvelous verdict. Which monster among the dense Tolkien lore stood out as complete nightmare fuel for you? The 9 kings, who were once human in spirit, turned into shrieking wraiths? Or perhaps the flame of Udun, lurking below Khazad-dûm? All the monsters on today's list will always remain a subject of fascination for those of us who enjoy the antagonistic role they play in our collective imagination. More than the snarling maws, razor-sharp claws, or vastness of these beings, their state of being primordial and the creation of one of the strongest Dark Lords is what strikes fear in us. However, on a more symbolic note, these monsters were created to represent sin and humanity. In a way, monsters like these hold up a mirror to the worst in us. Good ceases to exist without the bad. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone!